Those. We were told there are 36 buildings overall in this compound.
It somehow you feel like you're small in this compound, seeing how big it is, how grand it is.
Our guide around the compound, which is now completely deserted, is Marvin de la Paz. He works for the Presidential Anti-Organized Crime Commission, which everyone calls PAOK.
That part is the villas where big bosses are being housed.
It's almost like if you've ever been on holiday to Dubai, this is sort of what the apartment buildings look like in the nicer, affluent areas.
Meanwhile, the workers were packed into 6-person dorms. This part of the compound is surrounded by a high wall topped with barbed wire. But there are plenty of amenities. A supermarket, a choice of restaurants, a basketball court even.
It seems as though the intention was to just keep them in here and give them absolutely no reason to ever exit.
Indeed, there's a grilled meat store over there. There's a Sichuan restaurant here. This one says volcano grilled seafood.
Ooh. And as we get closer to the entrance, we're starting to see more of a mess. I can almost imagine the night that they came and people were just rushing out of here. Papers and suitcases and mattresses were flying around. They're all settled on the ground now, but you can almost kind of imagine and hear the chaos that went on that night.
Marvin de la Paz, the man from PAOK, who was on that midnight raid last March, remembers how the workers reacted when the police arrived.
You can see the fear first, the fear in their faces, because they knew that they're doing something wrong. And at the same time, somehow, those who were being tortured or being held against their will, you can see from their faces that they're relieved.
You mentioned that people were tortured here.
Yes, they suffered beatings. We managed to find at least 350 foreign nationals about that. But it's supposed to have at least 1,000 plus foreign nationals.
Okay, so you found 350, but you're saying this compound is big enough for 1,000.
Yes, because of the leak of information of the operation, a lot were able to escape the compound.
We'll be hearing more about leaked information in a while. But first, it's crucial to understand what all those people were up to. The police say that this operation was one huge con trick, a scam. Hundreds of workers stealing money. This is often known in this part of the world as 杀猪盘, a Chinese phrase meaning pig butchering, a brutal name for a brutal, cynical practice.
The scammers sit at their keyboards, grooming their victims, who are mainly in China. This can take months. They slowly build up trust. This is the fattening up process. And then they move in for the kill. The transfer of money to a fake bank account or a non-existent investment scheme. This is the slaughter.
Pig butchering scams are carried out mostly by Chinese syndicates. There are so-called scam hubs dotted all over Southeast Asia. In the Philippines, the scammers often use an online casino, a pogo, as a front to conceal the true nature of what's going on, as they did here in Bamban. At the center of the town where Alice Guo was mayor, there's a public basketball court that backs onto a busy street.
Ano pong pangalan niyo? What is your name?
Francisco Flores.
Francisco Flores. Ilang taon po kayo? How old are you po?
75.
Did you vote for Mayor Alice Guo?
Yes, binoto ko. Dahil mabait, matulungin sa mga tao.
Okay, so he's saying that he voted for Alice Guo because she's kind, she's generous, she's helpful.
Maganda, may Jollibee na dito, may McDo.
So she's brought McDonald's to Bamban, she's brought Jollibee, which is a Philippine fast food chain, which is often a sign of, a city's growing economy. He says that the roads have gotten better, there are street lights now. Alice was helpful, and the people love her.
Love her, yeah.
Okay, so we've just come into a vegetable stall. Hi po, ano pong pangalan niyo? What's your name?
My name is Priscilla Miaban.
And noong 2022, bumoto po kayo for mayor po.
Si Alice.
She voted for Alice Guo. Bakit po? Why did you vote for her po?
Maganda po siya, tapos mabait, tapos matulungin sa mga kapwa niya, babae.
Okay, so she's saying that Alice was beautiful, she was kind, and she was helpful to other women. Thank you po. Excuse me, tao po. We've come to a house with a large Alice Guo campaign poster. It looks quite old. It's a bit faded, so it must have been from her last campaign. And we are hoping someone's home to speak to them.
By sheer chance, it turns out that this was the home of a former political ally of Alice's, a man who ran for election as city councillor on Alice's ticket. His name is Fortunato Mejia.
I ran for councilor 2022.
Kaparty niyo po si...
Kaparte ko si Mayor Alice Guo.
She seems quite popular. Can you tell us why?
Yes, naging popular si Alice Guo dahil sa kanyang kabaitan, sa kanyang leadership.
Okay, so he's saying the reason she's so popular is because she did keep all of her campaign promises. One other reason they liked her was because she had good connections to investors that did help Bamban economically.
Ang alam ko, dahil maraming kaibigan, tsaka mga karamihan Chinese ang kanyang mga investor.
Okay, so most of her investors were Chinese.
But what did he know about the compound and the hundreds of people working there?
Wala ka rin alam.
He doesn't know. He didn't know anything about that.
Kasi wala namang nakakapasok eh.
Oh, because people weren't allowed inside anyway.
2 days after the raid, the police found an electricity bill for the compound in the name of Mayor Alice Guo. This aroused their suspicion. What had the mayor got to do with this multi-million-dollar enterprise? In May, she was called to answer this and many more questions at a special Senate hearing in Manila.
Madam Chair, mga 2 to 3 minutes lang po.
Please, you have the floor, Mayor.
Opo, thank you po. Ako po si Alice Guo.
One of the senators present was Sherwin Gatchalian.
I can still remember the first hearing. She's tall, she's pleasant, and she speaks very well. But there were a lot of question marks even, I think that came out during the first and the second hearing. She always answered, "Hindi ko maalala, Your Honor."
Your Honor, hindi ko lang po maalala po ngayon po.
I cannot remember, Your Honor. Where did you live at this point? I cannot remember, Your Honor. Who's your mother? I cannot remember, Your Honor, because she left us when she was young. That story became very interesting to the people as well. That's why people were glued to this hearing, because of the mystery behind her.
As the senators probed further, they began to understand details that connected Alice to the Pogo and the illegal businesses it concealed. And they began to understand that she had serious backers.
Her campaign is really organized. It's well-funded, it's well-planned. And you can only do that if you have money. So now the next question is, why Bamban? And that's connected to the Banban Pogo Hub that was built there. So you need a mayor who will be cooperative and at the same time who is submissive to the investors of that Bamban Pogo Hub. So you have this grand plan of a single unit, meaning the Bamban Pogo Hub and the local government unit can act singularly because they're in bed together.
Mm. And Alice would have had some measure of influence over local law enforcement?
Yeah, a lot of influence. And we also have information that she was also making friends with the military, making friends with the police, trying to latch on to very big political names and political families. So in other words, the mayorship opened the door for her to network with very important people.
As the hearings went on, information emerged about some of Alice's business associates. In April and May, verdicts came down in the biggest ever money laundering case in Singapore. 2 of those convicted were once co-owners with Alice of the land on which the compound in Bamban was eventually built.
And then last July, with the pressure growing, Alice disappeared. She didn't turn up for 2 months. And then she was found in Indonesia, where she was arrested and brought back to the Philippines. Meanwhile, Pogos, with all this adverse publicity, had become an embarrassment to the government. Alice was perhaps the final nail in their coffin. At the annual State of the Nation address last year, President Marcos made a dramatic announcement to an enthusiastic Congress.
Effective today, all pogos are banned.
The Anti-Organized Crime Commission has its headquarters in an office block in Manila. And guess what? This too used to be a pogo compound.
We raided this building October 27 of 2023.
This is Winston Casio, Deputy Head of Operations. He's wearing a golden brown bucket hat to match his corduroy jacket and very trendy sneakers.
We found almost 440 nationals here. This used to be known as Sunshine Plaza. It's now known as Sunshine Prison.
Prison because several hundred people are being held here awaiting either trial or deportation.
So this is one floor of detainees.
Can we go in?
Yes, we can. There's about 300, more than 300 of them here in this floor alone.
A lot of them are just sitting on what look like disassembled wardrobes, like flat-pack furniture, just wooden boards.
Or thin mattresses.
Yeah.
And there are flip-flops everywhere.
So there are some motivational posters on the walls saying...
This used to be pogo posters.
Right, so to encourage the scammers to scam better. Oh, here's a good one, your attitude to work determines the thickness of your billfold. So it determines how much money you'll make, basically.
Some people here don't want to talk to us. Others don't understand English. Some don't even want to make eye contact. But there is one man who's happy to speak.
How long have you been here in this building?
We just come here for a few days, maybe 1 week.
Okay. And what was your job?
I just go to the company for a few months, pogo company.
Was it a gambling company or was it a scamming company?
A gambling company.
Gambling company. And who were the customers of this company? Chinese people?
Yeah, most of our customers are Chinese, China mainland.
And what was it that made you decide to come here and accept this job?
Because I need money, to support my family.
I see.
Yeah.
Did you come from China to the Philippines?
Yeah. I come to China mainland to here.
您知道他们就是对您就是在关这儿的这些人有什么打算吗？
They want to deport us. We hope to deport us as soon as possible. Because stay here just a waste time,
So I asked whether this gentleman would prefer to be deported back to China, and he said that he would be because it's preferable to staying here. He would rather face a potential prison sentence.
Back in China?
Back in China, yes.
Yeah.
How old are you?
Me? 34.
Winston Casio brings us onto the roof of this strange building. It's caged in with a fence, reinforced by coils of razor wire. The fence is festooned with t-shirts and underpants hanging out to dry. We take in the sights.
So you've got Makati there.
Okay, so this is the big business district where all the fancy finance bros work. On the other side of the building, we get a nice view of that.
Makati skyline. And mind you, if I go down to the lobby and walk to any direction, I'd still find illegal pogos.
How can you tell if something's a pogo? What are the signs?
Well, there are a good number of foreign nationals in the area. And there has to be a supermarket that caters to Chinese, Vietnamese, Koreans.
I heard people speaking Korean down in the detention center. There were also some Vietnamese there, and of course there was our Chinese ex-pogo worker. And we know that many, if not most, of the people working in these pogo hubs are Chinese.
And that's the thing that really made the Alice Guo affair stand out, wasn't it?
Yes, that's right. Philippine government investigators found that Alice's fingerprints matched those on file for a Chinese girl, Guo Hua Ping, who had come to the Philippines as a teenager with her mother, also a Chinese citizen. This directly contradicted Alice's story that she had been born in the Philippines to a Chinese father and Filipino mother.
This matters for two important reasons. One, that she had no right to run for Philippine public office.
And two, there is massive diplomatic tension between the Philippines and China at the moment, which plays out mostly in confrontations in the South China Sea. And then, to cap it all, came the allegation that Alice was not just Chinese, but a Chinese spy.
Alice has always denied this.
So yung sinasabing pagsisinungaling po?
Ako po ay isang Filipino.
Here she is speaking among a scrum of journalists at one of those Senate hearings.
Ano sinabi mo?
Ako po ay isang Filipino at hindi po ako spy.
Thank you.
What she's saying is, I'm a Filipino and I am most definitely not a spy. But it's unsurprising that a rumor like this would spread like wildfire, because it speaks to a widespread fear that organized crime through these pogos has slipped through the cracks and started to infiltrate institutions of government in the Philippines.
We went to see Jay Peke'ng to discuss this. She's a lawyer and chief legislative officer to one of the country's best-known senators. Did she think Alice Guo was a spy?
I have no conclusive proof to say that she's a spy, but the question is important enough for the Philippines to be investigated further. I also think that there should be some clarity as to what spy means. Was it a case of her being planted at age 14 by a country that we know to be playing the long game? Or is it a case of the government comes to her and says, look, okay, you have a vulnerability, but you also have some measure of success. We want to use your success to have some contacts in the area to get some information. And if you don't provide this to us, then we can expose your vulnerability. If it's true that she is a malign foreign influence, I am more likely to believe that she didn't plan to be a spy, but then she was tapped to be one because of her influence in local politics.
How worried are you about the infiltration into Philippine state institutions?
Extremely worried. What is clear to us is that the money earned from these scam compounds would be enough to elect high officials in government. And considering that the Philippines is entering into elections in the midterm in a few months, I am sure that pogo money is being used to finance the candidacies of some of those vying for public office. So how this bodes for the future of Philippine politics and governance, the jury is still out.
So the worry is that in the worst case, organized crime ends up with a seat at the government table. Alice Guo has now been charged with a number of offences, the most serious of which, people trafficking, could land her in prison for 40 years if she's found guilty.
Hi, darling. Thank you. How are you doing? Good.
In the tropical garden quadrangle at De La Salle University, we meet Don McLean Gill, a foreign policy expert at the Department of International Studies. Tony and I were hoping for a little bit of context, because the Alice Guo affair has broken out at a time of significant tension between the Philippines and China, a huge challenge for the President Ferdinand Marcos Jr.
Under the Marcos Jr. administration, the initial period of his administration, there was this genuine willingness to manage relations with Beijing. His first visit in 2023 was to China to meet President Xi Jinping. A few weeks after the visit, the China Coast Guard, along with the maritime militia, began water cannoning Philippine ships, harassing Filipino crew, and operations within various parts of the 200 nautical mile exclusive economic zone of the Philippines.
Have you noticed the Alice Guo case having any effect on relations between the Philippines and China?
Well, one thing I'd like to highlight would be public opinion. To the fact that today, if we look into the most recent nationwide survey, 8 out of 10 Filipinos said that we would not be voting for a pro-Chinese candidate in the coming 2025 midterm elections. The issue of the threat posed by China to Philippine national security is today elevated as a national security issue. And that would effectively impact Philippine foreign policy. So clearly, the Alice Guo case serves as a pivotal element in shaping public opinion further based on these trends. And it is likely to continue as various activities continue to unfold at the expense of Philippine national interest.
Back in Bamban, we have one last question for Alice Guo's political ally, Fortunato Mejia, the man with her poster hanging outside of his house. How does he feel about the prospect of Alice going to jail for human trafficking?
Hindi niya gawain yun. Hindi ko naniniwala ang gawa niya yun. Hindi gagawin ni Alice sa human trafficking.
Okay, he doesn't believe she would ever do something like that.
Never na gagawin niya yun. Dahil may puso siya, alam ko, natatakot siya sa Panginoon.
Okay, so she would never do that because she's got a heart and she's afraid of God.
Inside the compound, we asked Marvin de la Paz, the man from PAOK, how it felt to walk around the abandoned buildings.
It's very crushing for me because knowing that this place made money out from evil, so it saddens me to know that there are people being abused just to have money, and there are people getting scammed, and it all happens in my country.
That's all from this edition of Assignment from the BBC World Service. It was presented by me, Jay Baruzzi.
And me, Tony Han. The producer was Tim Mansell.
Distribution of the BBC World Service in the United States is made possible by American Public Media, producer and distributor of award-winning public radio content, engaging audiences, creating meaningful experiences, and fostering conversations. APM, American Public Media, with support from Lisa. Lisa mattresses are designed and assembled in America. Plus, Lisa donates thousands of mattresses a year to shelters and those in need. LEESA.com.